The Flag Bearer. From Hero Tales from American History. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Leeson. Hero Tales from American History by Henry Cabot Lodge and Theodore Roosevelt. The Flag Bearer. Written by Theodore Roosevelt. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never beat retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift my soul to answer him. Be jubilant my feet. Our God is marching on. Julia Ward Howe. In no war since the close of the great Napoleonic struggles has the fighting been so obstinate and bloody as in the Civil War. Much has been said in song and story of the resolute courage of the Guards at Inkerman, of the charge of the Light Brigade, and of the terrible fighting and loss of the German armies at Mars-la-Tour and Gravelotte. The praise bestowed upon the British and Germans for their valour, and for the loss that proved their valour, was well deserved. But there were over 120 regiments, Union and Confederate, each of which in some one battle of the Civil War suffered a greater loss than any English regiment at Inkerman or at any other battle in the Crimea, a greater loss than was suffered by any German regiment at Gravelotte or at any other battle of the Franco-Prussian War. No European regiment in any recent struggle has suffered such losses as at Gettysburg befell the 1st Minnesota, when 82% of the officers and men were killed and wounded, or the 141st Pennsylvania, which lost 76%, or the 26th North Carolina, which lost 72%. Such as at the Second Battle of Manassas befell the 101st New York, which lost 74%, and the 21st Georgia, which lost 76%. At Cold Harbor the 25th Massachusetts lost 70%, and the 10th Tennessee at Chickamauga 68%, while at Shiloh the 9th Illinois lost 63%, and the 6th Mississippi 70%, and at Antietam the 1st Texas lost 82%. The loss of the Light Brigade in killed and wounded in its famous charge at Balaclava was but 37%. These figures show the terrible punishment endured by these regiments, chosen at random from the head of the list which shows the slaughter roll of the Civil War. Yet the shattered remnants of each regiment preserved their organization, and many of the severest losses were incurred in the hour of triumph and not of disaster. Thus the 1st Minnesota at Gettysburg suffered its appalling loss while charging a greatly superior force, which it drove before it, and the little huddle of wounded and unwounded men who survived their victorious charge actually kept both the flag they had captured and the ground from which they had driven their foes. A number of the Continental regiments under Washington, Greene, and Wayne did valiant fighting and endured heavy punishment. Several of the regiments raised on the northern frontier in 1814 showed, under Brown and Scott, that they were able to meet the best troops of Britain on equal terms in the open, and even to overmatch them in fair fight with the bayonet. The regiments which in the Mexican War, under the lead of Taylor, captured Monterrey and beat back Santa Anna at Buena Vista, or which, with Scott as commander, stormed Molino del Rey and Chapultepec, proved their ability to bear terrible loss, to wrest victory from overwhelming numbers, and to carry by open assault positions of formidable strength held by a veteran army. But in none of these three wars was the fighting so resolute and bloody as in the Civil War. Countless deeds of heroism were performed by Northerner and by Southerner, by officer and by private, in every year of the great struggle. The immense majority of these deeds went unrecorded, and were known to few beyond the immediate participants. Of those that were noticed it would be impossible even to make a dry catalogue in 10 such volumes as this. All that can be done is to choose out 2 or 3 acts of heroism, not as exceptions, but as examples of hundreds of others. The times of war are iron times, and bring out all that is best as well as all that is basest in the human heart. In a full recital of the Civil War, as of every other great conflict, there would stand out in naked relief feats of wonderful daring and self-devotion, and, mixed among them, deeds of cowardice, of treachery, of barbarous brutality. Sadder still, such a recital would show strange contrasts in the careers of individual men who at one time acted well and nobly, and at another time ill and basely. The ugly truths must not be blinked, and the lessons they teach should be set forth by every historian, and learned by every statesman and soldier. But, for our good fortune, the lessons best worth learning in the nation's past are lessons of heroism. From immemorial time the armies of every warlike people have set the highest value upon the standards they bore to battle. To guard one's own flag against capture is the pride, to capture the flag of one's enemy the ambition, of every valiant soldier. In consequence, in every war between peoples of good military record, feats of daring performed by color bearers are honorably common. The Civil War was full of such incidents. Out of very many 2 or 3 may be mentioned as noteworthy. One occurred at Fredericksburg on the day when half the brigades of Meagher and Caldwell lay on the bloody slope leading up to the Confederate entrenchments. Among the assaulting regiments was the 5th New Hampshire, and it lost 186 out of 300 men who made the charge. The survivors fell sullenly back behind a fence, within easy range of the Confederate rifle pits. Just before reaching it the last of the color guard was shot, and the flag fell in the open. A Captain Perry instantly ran out to rescue it, and as he reached it was shot through the heart. Another, Captain Murray, made the same attempt and was also killed, and so was a third, Moore. Several private soldiers met a like fate. They were all killed close to the flag, and their dead bodies fell across one another. Taking advantage of this breastwork, Lieutenant Nettleton crawled from behind the fence to the colors, seized them, and bore back the blood-won trophy. Another took place at Gaines' Mill, where Gregg's 1st South Carolina formed part of the attacking force. The resistance was desperate, and the fury of the assault unsurpassed. At one point it fell to the lot of this regiment to bear the brunt of carrying a certain strong position. Moving forward at a run, the South Carolinians were swept by a fierce and searching fire. Young James Taylor, a lad of 16, was carrying the flag, and was killed after being shot down 3 times, twice rising and struggling onward with the colors. The 3rd time he fell the flag was seized by George Cotchett, and when he in turn fell, by Shubrick Hayne. Hayne was also struck down almost immediately, and the 4th lad, for none of them were over 20 years old, grasped the colors and fell mortally wounded across the body of his friend. The 5th, Gadsden Holmes, was pierced with no less than 7 balls. The 6th man, Dominic Spellman, more fortunate but not less brave, bore the flag throughout the rest of the battle. Yet another occurred at Antietam. The 7th Maine, then under the command of Major T.W. Hyde, was one of the hundreds of regiments that on many hard-fought fields established a reputation for dash and unyielding endurance. Toward the early part of the day at Antietam it merely took its share in the charging and long-range firing, together with the New York and Vermont regiments which were its immediate neighbors in the line. The fighting was very heavy. In one of the charges the Maine men passed over what had been a Confederate regiment. The gray-clad soldiers were lying, both ranks, privates and officers, as they fell, for so many had been killed or disabled that it seemed as if the whole regiment was prone in death. Much of the time the Maine men lay on the battlefield, hugging the ground, under a heavy artillery fire, but beyond the reach of ordinary musketry. One of the privates, named Knox, was a wonderful shot, and had received permission to use his own special rifle, a weapon accurately sighted for a very long range. While the regiment thus lay under the storm of shot and shell, he asked leave to go to the front, and for an hour afterward his companions heard his rifle crack every few minutes. Major Hyde finally, from curiosity, crept forward to see what he was doing, and found